Listen close, my friends, for this is a story about how a smiling face can hide a sharp knife, and how a quiet house can hide the loudest secrets. In the village of Umu-oyie, where the red dust dances in the wind, a wealthy farmer named Obi was preparing for a wedding. But Obi was not a happy man. His heart was heavy because his first wife had passed away, leaving him with a tiny, crying baby named Kofi. The baby cried all day and all night, refusing to be held by anyone. If you're watching this video, please like, subscribe to the channel, and tell me in the comments where you're watching my folktale story from. I want to know how far it has traveled. On the wedding day, the drums beat loud enough to shake the palm trees. Adanna, the new bride, walked into the compound. She was beautiful and humble. Tradition said she should bow to her husband first, then to her mother-in-law, Neka. But Adanna did something that made the whole village gasp. She heard baby Kofi screaming from his mat. Instead of sitting on her bridal chair, she ran straight to the baby. She picked him up, whispered a soft song, and like magic, the baby stopped crying instantly. He rested his head on her chest and fell asleep. The villagers cheered. A true mother has arrived. But in the shadows, Neka, the mother-in-law, frowned. She did not like how easily Adanna had won everyone's heart. Months went by, and the village of Umu-oyie fell in love with Adanna. They called her the Golden Wife because everything she touched flourished. Her yam porridge was the sweetest, her compound was the cleanest, and her smile was the brightest. But there was one sadness in her life. Adanna could not have children of her own. The village healers shook their heads and said her womb was closed. But Adanna did not let this break her spirit. She poured all her motherly love into little Kofi. She carried Kofi on her back everywhere she went. When she went to the stream to fetch water, Kofi was there. When she went to the market to sell peppers, Kofi was there. She bathed him, fed him, and sang to him until he knew her voice better than anyone else's. The villagers whispered, "Look at her, she loves that boy more than if she had birthed him herself." Even Obi, her husband, began to smile again. The darkness of his grief was lifting. But Neka, the grandmother, watched from her hut with eyes as cold as flint. She was used to being the most important woman in the house. She was used to Obi asking her for advice. Now Obi only looked at Adanna. Neka felt her power slipping away like sand through her fingers. "Too perfect," she whispered to the wind. "No woman is this perfect without a secret." One evening, the moon was full and bright, casting long shadows across the compound. The family sat on mats to share the evening meal. It was time to break the kola nut, a sacred tradition to welcome peace and the spirits of the ancestors. Usually, Obi would give the first piece to his mother, Neka, to show she was the matriarch, the head woman of the house. Obi broke the nut with a loud crack. He smiled and turned toward his mother. But just as he reached out, baby Kofi, who was sitting on Adanna's lap, reached out his chubby hand and grabbed the kola nut. The baby giggled and pressed the nut into Adanna's hand instead. Obi laughed deeply, a sound of pure joy. "Huh, you see, Mama? Even the ancestors and the child choose my wife first. She is truly the heart of this home now." He meant it as a joke, but Neka did not laugh. Her face twisted into a scowl. She stood up so fast her stool fell over. She snatched a piece of kola nut from the bowl and threw it onto the hard earth. The nut shattered into 3 jagged pieces, a very bad omen in their culture. "Mark my words, Obi," Neka hissed, her voice shaking with anger. "A stranger who is too sweet will eventually rot your teeth. You have forgotten who gave you life." She stormed off into the darkness, leaving a cold silence behind her. 2 days after the incident with the kola nut, the air in the compound felt heavy. It was hot and sticky, like a storm was coming but refused to break. Adanna was in the kitchen hut pounding yam for dinner. She felt a strange shiver crawl down her spine, as if someone or something was watching her from the corners of the room. She wiped her brow and went to check on baby Kofi in his crib. He was sleeping, but something was wrong. Resting right in the middle of his forehead was a single jet black feather. Adanna picked it up. It didn't look like a chicken feather or a hawk feather. It felt oily and smelled like sulfur and old wet earth. "What is this?" she whispered, her heart beating a little faster. She threw the feather into the cooking fire. For a second, the orange flames turned a bright, ghostly blue before snapping back to normal. Adanna hugged herself, trying to shake off the fear. "It is just the wind," she told herself, "just a bird." But that night, as the family slept, a sudden gust of wind blew through the compound. It was so strong that it blew out every single lantern in the house at the exact same time, plunging them into total darkness. The spirits were gathering in Umu-oyie, and they were not there to visit. They were there to stay. It was 3 o'clock in the morning. The elders say this is the time when the veil between the living and the dead is the thinnest. The crickets had stopped chirping, and the village was silent as a graveyard. Adanna was sleeping soundly next to her husband, Obi. Suddenly, a sound woke her up. It wasn't a cry, and it wasn't a laugh. It was a low, steady hum, like a vibration coming from the corner of the room where the baby slept. Adanna rubbed her sleepy eyes and sat up. She looked toward the crib. The moonlight was streaming through the window, landing right on the baby. Adanna gasped. Baby Kofi, who was only 6 months old and could barely hold his head up, was sitting straight up in his crib. He was sitting as stiff as a statue. His eyes were wide open, staring blankly at the ceiling, unblinking. Adanna's heart hammered against her ribs. "Kofi?" she whispered, terrified. "My baby?" The baby did not blink. He slowly turned his head to look at her. Then he opened his mouth. A deep, guttural sigh came out, a sound too old and too weary for a baby. It sounded like an old man sighing. Adanna reached out a shaking hand to touch him. The moment her finger brushed his skin, he fell back onto the mattress, fast asleep and snoring softly, as if nothing had happened. Adanna sat in the dark, shaking, knowing she had not been dreaming. The next night, fear hung over the house like smoke. Adanna did not want to close her eyes, but exhaustion pulled her under. The house was quiet until the clock struck exactly 3 a.m. Adanna woke up instantly, her heart pounding against her ribs. She looked at the crib. This time, Obi was awake too. He was sitting up, watching his son. The moonlight made the room look pale and ghostly. Slowly, baby Kofi sat up again. He moved stiffly, like a wooden doll. The baby turned his head toward the door. Then he opened his mouth. But it was not a baby's cry that came out. It was the voice of a grown woman, raspy, cold, and filled with anger. "The soup is bitter. The soup is bitter. She is poisoning the house." The voice echoed off the mud walls. Adanna screamed and covered her mouth. Obi jumped out of bed, trembling. "Did you hear that?" he shouted, backing away from the crib. "That is not my son. That is a spirit." As soon as Obi shouted, the baby fell back onto the mattress, instantly asleep, looking as innocent as an angel. Obi looked at Adanna with wild eyes. "What have you done to him? Why does he speak with a dead woman's tongue?"
When the sun rose, it brought no warmth to the compound. Obi sat in the main hut, his head in his hands. Adanna knelt before him, weeping. "I swear, my husband, I do not know what is happening. I love Kofi. I would never harm him." Just then, Neka walked in. She did not look scared, she looked thoughtful. She adjusted her wrapper and sat down slowly. "Adanna," she said, her voice smooth like oil. "The baby said the soup is bitter. Who cooks the soup in this house? Is it not you?" Adanna looked up, shocked. "Mama, surely you don't believe?" Neka cut her off. "Spirits do not lie, my daughter. Maybe the baby sees what we cannot see. Maybe he sees that your heart is not as pure as your face." Obi looked from his mother to his wife. For the first time, a shadow of doubt crossed his face. He remembered how perfect Adanna was, how she had charmed everyone. Was it too good to be true? "Obi," Neka whispered, leaning in close. "A woman who cannot have her own child might become jealous of the one who did. Jealousy makes people do dark things." The seed of doubt was planted, and it began to grow fast. The horror was not over. The family decided to stay awake together the next night to see if it would happen again. They lit 3 lanterns and sat in the main room with the baby's crib in the center. They waited. 1 a.m. passed, 2 a.m. passed. The silence was so heavy it hurt their ears. Then, exactly at 3 a.m., the flame in the lanterns flickered and turned blue. Baby Kofi sat up. His eyes were rolled back, showing only the whites. He pointed a tiny finger directly at Adanna's side of the room. The raspy woman's voice spoke again, louder this time. "She wants the gold under the floorboards. She is greedy. She is eating my soul to find the gold." Neka gasped loudly. She jumped up and pointed at Adanna. "I knew it! Obi, did you hear? Just yesterday, Adanna was asking me where you keep your trading money. She has been plotting to steal from you." This was a lie. Adanna had never asked such a thing. But in the heat of the moment, with the demon voice ringing in his ears, Obi believed it. He looked at Adanna not with love, but with fear and disgust. Bad news travels faster than the wind in Umu-oyie. By the next morning, the story had leaked to the entire village. Women gathered at the stream to wash clothes, but they were not washing. They were whispering. "Did you hear? Adanna is a witch," one woman said, scrubbing a wrapper furiously. "She is using the baby for money rituals. That is why she loves him so much. She is fattening him up for the spirits." Another woman added, "I heard the baby speaks with the voice of the first wife, begging for mercy." When Adanna arrived at the stream with her water pot, the chatter stopped, instantly. The silence was loud and cruel. She walked toward the water, but the women blocked her path. They formed a wall of angry faces. "Do not dirty our water with your hands," a woman shouted. "Go back to your demons." Someone threw a handful of mud, hitting Adanna's clean wrapper. Then a stone flew, grazing her arm. Adanna dropped her pot, which shattered on the rocks. She turned and ran back home, tears blinding her eyes, while the laughter and curses of the women chased her all the way to her husband's gate.
When Adanna stumbled into the compound, she found chaos. Obi was tearing their bedroom apart. Mattresses were overturned, boxes were emptied, and clothes were scattered everywhere. "Where is it?" Obi screamed, his eyes red with lack of sleep. "Where are the charms you're using on my son?" Neka was there too, pretending to help search. She knelt by Adanna's bed and reached far underneath it. "Obi, look!" she cried out. Neka pulled out a small, dirty bag tied with red string. She opened it, and grave dust and small bones spilled out onto the floor. Adanna froze. She had never seen that bag in her life. Neka had planted it there. "The baby was right," Neka wailed. "She is using grave dust to control us. She wants to kill us all and take the gold." The evidence was right there on the floor. Obi stared at the bones. Then he looked at Adanna. The love in his eyes was gone, replaced by pure rage. He walked up to her and slapped her hard across the face. "You are not a wife," he spat. "You are a monster." Adanna fell to the floor, knowing that no words could save her now. The sun had not yet set when Adanna was stripped of her dignity. Obi, the man who once looked at her with love, now looked at her with cold eyes. He ripped her beautiful necklaces from her neck and pulled the fine wrappers from her waist, leaving her in simple, torn rags. "You are not worthy of these things," he said, his voice hard as stone. "You are not worthy to be in the house of the living." He dragged her by the arm, past the kitchen where she used to cook, past the main house where she used to sleep, all the way to the back of the compound. He threw her into the goat shed. It was a small, smelly hut made of rough wood, filled with dry grass and animal droppings. The goats bleated in confusion as Adanna fell onto the dirt floor. Obi slammed the heavy wooden door shut and locked it with a rusted padlock. "You stay here," he shouted through the wood. "Do not let me see your face." Inside the dark shed, Adanna curled up into a ball. But the worst pain was not the smell or the darkness. It was the sound coming from the main house. She could hear baby Kofi crying, a desperate, lonely wail. She heard Nneka's voice saying, "Hush now, the witch is gone, I am here." But the baby did not stop crying. Without Adanna, the light left the compound. Baby Kofi, who had grown plump and happy under Adanna's care, began to wither like a plant without water. He refused to eat the pap Nneka made for him. He spat out the water Obi tried to give him. Within 2 days, his skin was hot with fever, and his ribs began to show. The village elders came to visit. They stood over the crib, shaking their heads. "The witch is eating him from a distance," one elder said, tapping his walking stick on the floor. "Even locked in the shed, her evil spirit drains his life." Nneka nodded vigorously, wiping fake tears from her eyes. "I try to feed him, but her demon blocks his throat. We must send her away forever, or the boy will die." The fear in the room was palpable. The elders made a decision that struck fear into the hearts of all who heard it. They decided that at the next full moon, which was only 2 days away, Adanna would be banished into the evil forest. In Umu-oyie, the evil forest was a place of no return, where people were sent to die among the spirits. Adanna, sitting in the goat shed, heard the decree shouted by the town crier. She realized she was not just fighting for her marriage anymore. She was fighting for her life. Hunger made Adanna weak. She had not eaten in 3 days. As she lay on the straw in the goat shed, drifting between sleep and wakefulness, a strange feeling came over her. The air in the shed grew suddenly cold, and the smell of goat droppings was replaced by the scent of rain and lilies. Adanna opened her eyes, or perhaps she was dreaming. Standing in the corner of the shed was a woman. She was transparent, glowing with a faint blue light. Adanna recognized her instantly. It was Obi's first wife, Kofi's dead mother. Adanna tried to scream, but no sound came out. The spirit did not look angry. She looked incredibly sad. Tears that shone like diamonds rolled down her ghostly cheeks. The spirit raised a hand and pointed a long finger at her own throat. Then, she pointed toward the main house where the baby was sleeping. She did this 3 times. Finally, she leaned forward, her face close to Adanna's, and mouthed a single word. She made no sound, but Adanna read her lips clearly. "Listen." Then, just as quickly as she had appeared, the spirit vanished, leaving Adanna wide awake in the darkness. "Listen," Adanna whispered. "Listen to what?" She realized then that she had been too busy crying to truly hear what was happening in the house. That night, a heavy storm rolled over Umu-oyie. Thunder crashed so loud it shook the ground, and rain pounded the roof like stones. Adanna knew this was her chance. The noise of the storm would cover the sound of her escape.
With the last of her strength, she found a loose rock on the floor and began to smash the rusted lock of the shed. Clang! Clang! The lock finally snapped. Adanna pushed the door open and stepped into the rain. She was free. She could run to her parents' village. She could run far away. But she remembered the ghost's command. Listen. Instead of running toward the gate, Adanna crept through the mud toward the window of Nneka's hut. The window was slightly open. Adanna pressed her back against the wet wall and held her breath. Inside, she heard Nneka walking back and forth. Nneka was talking to herself, or so it seemed. When the witch is gone, I will sell the yam barn. I will be the queen again. Then silence. Adanna peeked in. Nneka was standing over the baby's crib, whispering things into his ear over and over again. Adanna's eyes widened in shock. The baby wasn't possessed. He was a mimic. He was repeating exactly what he had been told. Adanna knew the truth now, but who would believe a woman branded a witch? She needed power greater than Nneka's lies. She needed Baba Jide. Baba Jide was the blind diviner who lived deep in the forbidden forest. Most people were terrified of him, but Adanna had no fear left. She turned away from the house and ran into the thick bush. The forest was dark and alive with noises. Thorns tore at her skin, and tree roots tried to trip her, but she did not stop.
After hours of running, she saw a flicker of firelight. A small hut made of bones and clay stood in a clearing. Sitting in front of the fire was an old man with milky white eyes. He did not turn around as she approached. "I had been waiting for you, innocent one," Baba Jirade said, his voice sounding like dry leaves. Adanna fell to her knees, panting. "Baba, help me! They think I am a monster!" The old man smiled a toothless smile. He reached into a calabash and pulled out a piece of white chalk. "The truth is a fire," he said. "It burns the liar, but warms the honest. Take this. Tomorrow you will not run. You will return." Adanna took the chalk, her hand trembling. The final battle was about to begin. The morning sun rose over Umu-oyie, but there was no joy in the village. This was the day Adanna was to be banished to the evil forest. The villagers gathered at Obi's compound with sticks and stones, ready to chase the witch away. Obi stood by the gate, looking old and defeated. Nneka stood beside him, trying to hide the triumphant smile on her face. "Bring her out," the eldest man commanded. "Let us cleanse our land." But before they could drag her out, the gate of the compound swung open. Adanna stepped out. She was not crying. She was not trembling. She was covered from head to toe in white chalk, the mark of purity and spirit protection. She looked terrifyingly royal, like a queen returning from war. The crowd gasped and stepped back. Adanna walked straight to the elders and stopped. "I will go," she said, her voice clear and strong. "But first, the baby must speak one last time. If he accuses me again in front of the blind seer, I will walk into the forest myself." The elders looked at Nneka. Nneka felt a drop of sweat roll down her back, but she thought, "The baby is possessed. He will only say evil things." She nodded. "Let him speak," Nneka said. "Let him seal her fate." The village square was packed tight. Every man, woman, and child in Umu-oyie was there. The air was so still you could hear a pin drop. In the center sat Obi holding baby Kofi on his lap. Beside them stood Adanna, white as a ghost in her chalk markings. And emerging from the crowd came Baba Jirade, the blind diviner, tapping his stick on the ground. He carried a small calabash bowl filled with a sparkling gray powder. Baba Jirade raised his hand. "This is the dust of silence," he announced, his voice scratching the air like dry leaves. "When I throw this into the fire, no tongue in this square will be able to lie. Only the innocent will speak." He threw the powder into the central fire. Whoosh! The flames turned a brilliant, blinding white. A heavy silence fell over the crowd. It felt like the earth itself was holding its breath. Obi looked down at his son. Baby Kofi was awake. His eyes were bright and alert. He looked around the crowd, then his eyes locked onto one person. He did not look at Adanna. He looked directly at his grandmother, Nika. The baby opened his mouth. The crowd leaned in, terrified, expecting the raspy demon voice to accuse Adanna again. Baby Kofi opened his mouth, and a voice came out. But it was not the voice of the dead mother, and it was not the voice of a baby. It was a high, sharp, unmistakable voice. It was the voice of Nika.
The baby spoke clearly, mimicking the exact tone and cadence of his grandmother. "Drink this, you fool. If you don't die, I will never control my son. Drink it and go." The words rang out across the silent square. The crowd gasped as one. People turned to look at Nika. Neka's face went pale, her skin turning the color of ash. She took a step back, her hands shaking. "No," she whispered, that is a trick." The baby did not stop. He continued in Neka's voice, repeating words from a dark memory. "You think you can take my house? I will bury you and raise your son myself." The horror of the truth began to dawn on everyone. The baby was not possessed by a demon, he was a witness. Baba Jide stepped forward, his blind eyes seeing more than anyone else. "The child is not a demon," he shouted, pointing his staff at the baby. "He has the gift of the ancestors. He is a mirror. He repeats the wickedness he hears." The crowd murmured in confusion. Then realization struck them like lightning. "Think," Baba Jide commanded. When the baby said, "She is poisoning the soup," he was not talking about Adanna cooking dinner. He was repeating what Nika said the night she poisoned the first wife. Obi stood up, his legs shaking violently. He looked at his mother with horror. The pieces of the puzzle slammed together in his mind. The greed for gold, the poisoning, the demon. It was never Adanna. It was Nika talking to her victim, and later talking to herself while the baby lay in the crib listening. The baby had been recording everything like a living vessel of truth. "Mama," Obi whispered, his voice breaking, "did you kill my wife?" Nika panicked. She saw the anger rising in the eyes of the villagers. She saw her son reaching for his machete. "It is a lie," she screamed, her voice cracking. "Adanna is a witch. She is a ventriloquist. She is throwing her voice to frame me." Desperate, Nika lunged forward. She tried to grab baby Kofi from Obi's arms, perhaps to cover his mouth, or maybe to hurt him. "Give me the boy. I must cleanse him." But the moment Neka's hand touched the baby's skin, Kofi threw his head back and screamed. This time, it wasn't Neka's voice. It was the terrified, choking voice of Obi's first wife, the dead mother. "Neka, please. The yam porridge burns my throat. It burns!" The entire village froze. Only 2 people in the world knew what the first wife had eaten the night she died. Obi, who had found the empty bowl, and Nika, who had fed it to her. The baby had just revealed a secret only the killer could know. Nika froze, her hand still outstretched, knowing she had just condemned herself. The silence in the village square was broken by a low, terrifying rumble. It did not come from the sky. It came from deep beneath the earth where Nika stood. The baby's revelation about the burning yam porridge had unlocked the anger of the land itself. Suddenly, the ground around Neka's feet began to smoke. The red dust became hot, like ashes from a fire. Neka screamed and tried to run, but she could not move her feet. It was as if invisible hands were holding her ankles, rooting her to the spot of her judgment. If you're watching this video, please like, subscribe to the channel, and tell me in the comments where you're watching my folktale story from. I want to know how far it has traveled.
Then the horror truly began. Thousands of large red soldier ants began to swarm out of the cracks in the dry earth. They did not bite anyone in the crowd. They marched in a straight line toward Nneka. They climbed up her wrappers, biting and stinging. The villagers gasped and backed away, covering their children's eyes. "The earth rejects her," Babajide shouted, slamming his staff down. "The land vomits out the poison." Nneka fell to her knees, swatting frantically at the ants, her cries of pain echoing against the mud walls. She realized that no amount of gold or power could save her from the justice of nature. Broken and terrified, she finally raised her hands in surrender. "Stop," she wailed. "Make it stop. I will confess. I will say everything." At her words, the ants stopped their attack as quickly as they had begun, retreating back into the earth. Nneka lay panting in the dust, her fine clothes ruined, her wig askew. She looked up at Obi, her son, tears streaming down her face. Not tears of sorrow, but tears of defeat. "I did it," she rasped, her voice trembling. "I poisoned your first wife." The crowd let out a collective moan of shock. Obi fell to his knees, burying his face in his hands. "Why?" Obi sobbed. "She loved you. She was good to you." Nneka spat on the ground, a flash of her old pride returning for a second. "She was too strong," Nneka hissed. "She wanted to change the way we farm. She wanted to manage the gold. If she lived, I would have become a nobody in my own son's house. I am the matriarch. I built this compound." She pointed a shaking finger at Adanna. "And then she came, the perfect wife. The village loved her too much. I saw my power disappearing again. I had to destroy her before she took my place." Adanna looked at the old woman with pity. "Mama," Adanna said softly, "I never wanted your place. I only wanted to be a daughter to you." Nneka slumped forward, realizing that her greed had cost her the only family she had left. The confession was made. Now judgment had to be passed. In the old days, a murderer might have been stoned, but the elders of Umu-oyie chose a punishment that was far heavier than death. The chief elder stepped forward. "Nneka," his voice booming like thunder, "because you used your voice to weave lies, and because you used your voice to poison a family, you shall lose the right to be heard."
He pointed to the edge of the village, near the dense forest where the outcasts lived. "You are banished to the hut of silence. You will live there alone. No one will visit you. No one will speak to you, and you will speak to no one until the ancestors call you home." As the guards lifted her up to drag her away, Nneka tried to scream a curse at them. She opened her mouth, but no sound came out. Her voice was gone. She clutched her throat in panic, eyes bulging. The shock, or perhaps the spirits, had taken her tongue. She was led away, a silent, hunched figure, disappearing into the shadows, while behind her, baby Kofi let out a sweet, normal, bubbling laugh, the sound of a child finally free from the ghosts. When the dust settled, Obi crawled over to Adanna. He did not stand. He stayed on his knees, his head bowed low to the earth. He grabbed the hem of her torn, dirty wrapper. "Adanna," he wept, his shoulders shaking with grief. "I am not worthy to call you wife. I listened to the lies. I threw you in the dirt. I let you starve." He looked up, his eyes swollen. "If you want to leave, I will give you half my wealth. You deserve better than this house of snakes." Adanna looked down at her husband. She saw a man who had been manipulated by the person he trusted most in the world. She looked at baby Kofi, who was reaching out his little arms toward her. Adanna knew that if she left, the child would have no mother. Her heart, vast and kind, made the choice. She knelt down and wiped the tears from Obi's face. A broken pot can be mended, but it takes time for the clay to dry. "I will stay, Obi, not for the wealth, but for the truth we found today, and for our son." She picked up Kofi, and he nestled into her neck. The sun began to set, painting the village in gold, washing away the darkness of the night. Many years have passed since that day. If you go to Umu-oyie now, you will find a young man named Kofi. He is strong and wise, the leader of his family.
He sits by the fire with his own children, telling them the story of his two mothers, the one who gave him life and the one who saved it. Adanna sits in the corner, her hair white as wool, smiling as she watches them. She is the most respected woman in the land, the true matriarch. Nneka never spoke again. She passed away in the hut of silence, taking her greed to the grave. The curse was broken, and the house of Obi flourished, proving that light will always conquer darkness, no matter how long the night lasts. The story you have just heard is a beautiful African tale I heard long ago. I'm telling you to wake your minds to the lesson. Jealousy is a poison that you drink yourself, expecting the other person to die. If you were the protagonist, Adanna, what would you have done? Would you have forgiven Obi and stayed, or would you have taken the money and left him for what he did to you? I want to know your opinion, because every story is like a candle that can light the path for someone else. God bless you, and may courage guide your hands. Meanwhile, on the final screen, I'm leaving you with one of the channel's most beloved folk tales. I'm sure you'll love it. Thank you for staying with me until this moment.